So the female reproductive system. So we talked about the actual function of the female reproductive system. We said there was three main functions. Number one, what was it? Gamete formation, so they produce eggs. Number two, hormones. They produce hormones that give them a secondary female sex characteristics. And number three, hormones for pregnancy. Okay, so these are the three main functions. Now we're going to look at the actual pathway of where everything goes, right? So all of the eggs that are produced in the female are produced in this sac cavity called the ovaries. The ovaries, all of the eggs are formed there during instances of menstruation, and we have ovulation. Ovaries are the primary controllers of all of these secondary sex characteristics and gamete formation, the actual function of the female reproductive system. Okay, so ovaries now branch off into this structure called the fallopian tube. So fallopian tube is also called the uterine tube, but here for this case we'll just call it the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is made up of four specific structures here. The way I always remember it is the FIAI, right? So you have the fibriae, you have the infundibulum, and this is going from the lateral to the medial side. So going from outside the body towards the midline, right? So you have the fibriae, the infundibulum, the agromer, and the isthmus, right? So the FIAI. Fiai, right? Anyway, so fallopian tube comes here. Fallopian tube branches off into the uterus. So now you have the uterus. The uterus is composed of three specific layers. The first layer, the outermost layer, which is fibrous connective tissue, is called the perimetrium. The middle layer, which is composed of smooth muscle, this is called the myometrium. And then the third and innermost layer, the deepest layer, this is called the endometrium. So instances of, for example, endometriosis that you see is a very common condition. So let me write that down. So endometriosis. This is a condition where there is abnormal tissue from the endometrium in different parts of the reproductive system. So for example, you'll have endometrial tissue in your ovaries, and this becomes an abnormal condition because it can lead to instances of infertility. Right. The next layer that you have is the cervix. Right. So cervix is the opening right before you enter the vaginal canal. And then in the end, everything goes out. Right? So that's a very general and basic way of understanding of where and how egg is produced, stored, and where it's released, right? So if I were to ask you, where does fertilization take place? So fertilization takes place where? So fertilization takes place actually in the fallopian tube. So when the sperm enters the female reproductive system, the actual combination of the sperm and egg to create the zygote happens in the fallopian tube. So fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube. However, uterus is where we have the implantation. Right? So implantation, so as soon as the sperm is fertilized in the fallopian tube, it becomes mobile. It migrates, and then it migrates, and then finally enters the uterus, where it's there for about 9 months until birth.